This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 360, entitled Feminists provide the carrot and Masculists the stick in the FIPping of Fluffies. Description. This flyer suggests that as Masculist ideas spread, that the Masculist movement should start thinking about creating allies with other like-minded groups, for example, biconscious feminists, since the two groups have something fundamental in common, that is, both want to see the FIPping of women. The feminists want to see women become FIPs so that women can become financially independent of men, thus liberating women from the subjugation of men's will. And the Masculists want to see the FIPping of women so that men can be freed from the man-slavery of fluffy parasites. This commonality promotes bridge building between the Masculists and future potential allies. Flyer itself. Feminists provide the carrot and Masculists the stick in the FIPping of Fluffies, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Feminists and Masculists need not be enemies across the board. For sure, Masculists have a hatred of the hypocrisy of the fluffy feminists, who behave as feminists in the parliaments, but as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, preaching equal rights for women, but rejecting equal obligations for women, by not bothering to have to FIP up, by bothering to get a career-competent education, so that women do not expect to be able to parasite off the money of a man, effectively manslaving him. Most Masculists are second-wave male feminists, seeing the giving of equal rights for women, for example, equal pay for equal work, equal access to the professions, the MARA, that's maternity rejection right, aka abortion right, fault-free divorce, etc., as prerequisites to the effective FIPping of women. However, third-wave feminists, who are out to empower women legally and politically at men's expense, often strongly abuse men, especially in the divorce courts, and the fanatical objection of third wavers to the legislation of the paternity rejection right, which would force women to grow up, to FIP up, to behave as responsible adults. So Masculists support the second wavers and despise and aim to destroy the third wavers. This flyer is about an area in which Masculists agree with both second wavers and third wavers, and that is in the importance of women to FIP up. Feminists have been preaching to women for decades that it is important for women to study STEM, science, tech, engineering, math, so that they can obtain a well-paid job and hence be financially independent of a man. The feminists emphasize the financial autonomy of women by the need for women to FIP up. The feminists dangle the carrot in front of women, saying such things as, quote, "By becoming financially independent, you are no longer a slave to a man, doing what he wants you to do because he pays for you and hence controls you. By having your own career and a decent salary, you become the boss of your own life." End quote. Of course, the Masculists agree with this reasoning and give it a different slant, looking at the other side of the coin, so to speak. You can say that the feminists are dangling the carrot at women, whereas the Masculists are waving the stick at women, threatening them with that if you women don't FIP up, that is, become FIPs, then the Masculists will hit you with the proverbial stick, punishing you severely by forcing you to rot on the shelf, totally ignored by Masculists and MGTOWs, which in time will be most men, as most men adopt masculist attitudes, the way feminism has infiltrated most women's minds over the past half-century. As masculism spreads throughout the world, women will feel the growing moral and psychological pressure on them to FIP up or be punished by men, ignored by men, spat at by men for being fluffy parasites, immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin. Soon, there will be masculist groups in every high school, putting powerful moral pressure on young high school women to FIP up or be dumped by potential quality man dates. So, with the feminist carrot and the masculist stick, women should be really feeling the heat in the coming years, as both are applied to fluffies, that's traditional women who don't bother to FIP up, expecting to be able to parasite off the money of a man, sexploiting him, having him work for her, having him be her manslave. So you can say that the feminists are out to FIPify women so as to liberate women, that is the feminist emphasis, and that the masculists are also out to FIPify women so as to liberate men, that is the masculist emphasis, so that men no longer have to be manslaves to the hated fluffy parasites. Feminists have been writing for decades, even centuries, about the importance of financial independence for women. There are many books on this topic. Masculists are now doing the same, but with the emphasis being on the liberation of men. Masculist theorists are very conscious of the enormous importance of the FIPping of women for the liberation of men, for the freeing of men from the traditional male gender role of being a manslave to a fluffy female. For example, if nearly all women are FIPs, the legislation of the para is made much more practical and doable. The divorce courts will give joint custody to parents, knowing that both of the two parents are FIPs who can take care of themselves financially. The widespread FIPping of women will create a moral expectation that it is a strong social expectation that women be FIPs or be spat at for being vile manslavers. Several generations back, there was a certain amount of sense in the two traditional gender roles of the mother looking after a horde of kids at home while the father was out at work earning money to pay for his family. In those days, both parents had a full-time job. Without household gadgets, for example washing machines, microwaves, etc., cooking and washing clothes took many hours every day, keeping mothers' lives busy. My own mother was from a 12-sibling family on a farm. The Industrial Revolution, the factory system, etc., led to the need for the nuclear, non-multi-generational family, which had much greater mobility, which in turn was needed as company factories went regularly bankrupt and employees had to move quickly and easily to find work in other localities. But over the decades, with the male inventions of the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, higher education, modern medicine, female life expectancies in the mid-80s, women chose to have 0, 1 or 2 kids, hence had a career window of half a century. This changed everything, especially for men. Once women could work, that is, in paid employment, the masculist movement was born, which started telling women, quote, "Now that you women can work, you must work. Anything else is manslavery, and hence a moral abomination. If you remain manslavers of men, then in the limit, we will kill you." The masculists claim that manslavery is slavery. Slavery rouses passions. Slavery is a war issue. Look at the root cause of the US Civil War. The masculists are at war against the fluffy parasites and against the fluffy feminist hypocrites. End quote. Masculist theorists are hyper-conscious of the importance of the FIPping of women and the critical role it will play in solving most of the problems addressed by the masculists, especially manslavery, the lack of a para, etc. With nearly all women as FIPs, and as a result of that, the men fairing of the gender laws, men can undergo a revolution in their traditional gender role, comparable to what women went through in the 60s and 70s, when millions of women found that they had time in their hands with their few kids, and so streamed into the workforce. Once women became FIPs, well, maybe a quarter of them, men could then afford to work less, devote more time and attention to their own interests and not be a manslave to a woman in order to get regular sex from her, which was a devil's bargain, a true man trap. Thus, one sees what a major social revolution the male invention of the contraceptive pill was. It liberated women, which in turn liberated men. In fact, the liberation of men is really only in its baby steps, since society, and nearly all women, are still oblivious to the idea that men need liberating. After half a century of feminist rhetoric, most women have the deluded impression that gender politics is a one-way street, that only men are gender oppressors. It's the role of the masculist theorists to educate women and society in general that gender oppression is definitely a two-way street. Masculists need to broadcast their message now that that message has been already fairly well clarified by the masculist theorists. The time is now right for masculists to get out into the streets, haranguing the feminazis for all their sexist hypocrisies, especially in the divorce courts. The masculists need to contact the journalists and educate them into masculist ideas, especially the male journalists, who are as brainwashed by half a century of feminism as is the culture as a whole. As masculist ideas spread, the more moderate of the feminists will become biconscious, that is, they will sympathise with the plight of the masculists and see both sides of the gender oppression issues. The masculists can then work with these biconscious feminists, trying to persuade them that there is quite a lot of overlap between the feminists and the masculist programs for society, especially in regard to the need for the FIPping of women. The feminists want to FIP women in order to give women financial autonomy. The masculists want to FIP women in order to liberate men from manslavery, so that men have more options with their lives, not being obligated to pay a very heavy price to get regular sex from a woman. That is, by becoming her manslave, working for her, so that she doesn't have to bother to FIP up, can sit on her fat parasitic ass and live off a man's money, who pays for her to raise her kids in a middle-class house, both of whom she can rip away from him easily a decade later in the hated, fluffy feminist hypocrite-dominated divorce court system. Many universities have education programs to promote the study of STEM fields amongst young university women. The masculists need to approach such feminists and say that your feminist carrot approach alone will not be as effective as a combined carrot and stick approach, that is, combining the feminist carrot with the masculist stick, that is, with the masculist threat, that if women don't FIP up, they will pay a very heavy price, that is, they won't get a man, hence will be loveless, sexless, babyless, and as masculism spreads throughout the society, will be spat at, certainly by men, and increasingly by biconscious feminist women. Such fluffy women will be seen as pariahs, to be excluded from society, forcing them to FIP up or be ostracised. The take-home message of this flyer is, I suppose, that masculists need to be thinking more politically, more strategically, putting out feelers towards potential allies in the masculist struggle to amend fair society, to force women to FIP up, to mend fair the gender laws, to rid society of the current monoconscious, hypocritical sexism of the hated feminazis who remain clueless as to how women oppress men. To the extent that feminist and masculist agendas overlap, then we masculists should be thinking about allying ourselves with the biconscious feminist to mutual benefit. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, and e-textbook of 350 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.